Well, in the last week, we've heard Barnaby Joyce say net zero by 2050 is utterly untenable. So what do you say to those who bring a cynical mind to this argument that you're bringing today, that you're trying to kill off net zero by stealth and you don't really believe in it?
No, this is Labor's net zero by not 2050.
Hang on, the Nationals signed up for it, didn't they?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. There's a differentiation. Don't conflate the two. Labor's net zero is a lot different to what the Coalition's net zero was. Ours was about technology. It was about investing in technology and as well as making sure renewables had a place. But it was planned and it was planned properly, so there wasn't unintended consequences. But we also invested in technology like carbon capture storage for gas and coal. In fact, the Biden administration just announced $1.2 billion in carbon capture storage projects to make sure that we live up to our international commitments of reducing emissions by giving us reliable energy. And that's why the Nationals have led for over a decade the conversation that needs to happen around the emerging technology of nuclear, zero emission technology that can go in where existing coal-fired power stations are. We don't need 28,000 kilometres of new transmission lines, which will save billions of dollars, nearly $100 billion that Australians are going to pay for. So we're just saying there was a way through this. Our net zero is a lot different to what Labor's is, and the fact that they've accelerated at 2030 is putting all this pressure on electricity bills that you're paying for now. We're saying there's a better way, and in fact, Peter Dutton and I are saying there's a better way than what the Morrison-Joyce government put, because we're prepared to have the courage to add to that technology mix nuclear. And I think that's a common sense solution that I'm proud Peter Dutton and I are prepared to advance as a conversation across the country.
So do you essentially agree with Barnaby Joyce?
No, we believe in our international commitments, because if we don't, let me make this clear, if we hadn't signed up to net zero, your interest rate today, capital markets, both private and public, we're going to factor in an additional 1.5% to 3%, and so mortgage payers will be paying for that. Our farmers will be paying that on their interest bills, but they'd also be getting less for their commodities because they'd be tariffed because we hadn't made that international commitment. Yeah. And so, do you really want to change TAC now in a cost of living crisis and go back out there and say, let's blow up net zero commitment that we've made and cost Australians a whole lot extra? We're saying we've got time. We don't need to do this by 2030. We can plan and get this properly achieved, live up to international commitments and make sure that we have a finally affordable energy that's reliable and reduces our emissions.
But we don't have time. Isn't that the point? And I'm not talking about the climate aspect of all this. I'm talking about the report from AEMO, who said essentially renewables aren't catching up with the speed in which we need them, and therefore, places like Eraring coal needs to be extended. That's not an ideal situation, is it? And you're talking about nuclear, but at what point do you become pragmatic and say, well, look, we can keep on talking about nuclear and that can be your end goal to get there, but you've got to do something in the meantime?
Well, this is exactly what AEMO is saying. The government's not being pragmatic by trying to rush to 82% renewables by 2030. It can't be achieved. That's 22,000 solar panels a day must be laid. 40 wind turbines a month must be put up. There's not the supply chain for even that type of infrastructure to be sent to Australia, from China mostly, to be able to get here and be put up in time. And so what AEMO is saying is a very loud message to this government, is that their ideology isn't meeting the practical reality, and why other state governments are now having to make the right decision in making sure that we don't rush this and that we actually need to keep, like Eraring, going longer, and having to make sure that we do have that affordable, reliable power. But it's also a big message to take away all the handbrakes that have taken away investment confidence, particularly with gas. We are drawing down on gas supplies rather than firming up renewables that's required with gas. This government has demonised gas and they're not prepared to drill holes, so you're going to pay more. So that the warnings are not for AEMO to rush. They're saying, get this policy settings right. I wrote to the Prime Minister who became leader and said, let's have a National Energy Summit. Let's talk about everything that's on the table. But he turned his back on me, and unfortunately, we're paying the price for that at the moment. And the Prime Minister needs to intervene because Chris Bowen is out of his depth on this one. His ideology isn't meeting the practical reality of what's being bled out of Australians' wallets at the moment.
Yeah, we're feeling it. David Littleproud, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.